Here the radiograph illustrates the extraction sockets, and again you can see that they are relatively shallow and they will be obliterated in the final osteotomies. The septal bone is maintained in this situation. It's critical that we maintain that septal bone so that we can maintain tissue height and keep the nice interdental triangles as possible. Here we see the 4 roots that were removed, had been internally or externally resorbed. There just wasn't very much to work with for this patient, and you could see her concern, being a relatively young person, of losing your 4, the concern of losing your 4 natural teeth has to be a very psychologically traumatic experience. So this is very important. We fabricate a surgical guide based on the CT diagnostics of the Nobel Guide scanning software. The laboratory is able to stabilize the 4 rings, which are surgical guide rings, quite nicely. But you can see there's no set pins to hold this appliance in place. It's more like a precision occlusal guard that will allow us stability and allow us to use the rings in the surgical placement of our dental implants. Here's an occlusal view of the same. We have a tight situation, 2 laterals and 2 central incisors, but we were able to use the computer to properly angle and position our dental implants, so we knew that we could use a surgical guide in this situation to ideally place the implants. If we were unable to use this, or if we were unable to place the rings or to stabilize them correctly, we would probably do this case freehand. Doing the case freehand would obviously create some discrepancy or disharmony and probably would not allow us to load the implants immediately as easily and as predictably as we were able to do in this situation by using a very stable surgical guide. Close-up view of the 4 rings. You can see the separation that will be created from the implants. We have plenty of room to place the implants in the correct position. Here we're simply placing or snapping in the maxillary surgical guide, again created by the dental laboratory. They've already created models and positioned the final teeth where they ideally need to be. This occlusal or this surgical guide fits on the occlusal of the teeth and needs to be stable. It cannot rock into position. So it's really snug and kind of snaps into position. An occlusal view of the same. Now we're using different keys with the Nobel Guide system that will allow us to initially do our 2mm pilot drill to the correct depth. Now, these surgical guides are very precisely made, and they increase the distance from the crest of the bone to the top of the surgical guide by 10 millimeters. So our surgical drills need to be compensated for this extension of the surgical guide itself. So here we're simply placing a 2mm key into our 3.5 millimeter ring, and we're going to use our 2mm drill, initiating drill or pilot drill, to make our initial osteotomy. Now we've also predetermined depth of all of our implants, so we know exactly how deep we want each of the implants to be. We know their depth and their width precisely. It's a very precise system. You can see that the initiating drill or the pilot drill has markings on them. We know we're going to a certain depth, 13 millimeters, and we'll go to the proper line. And here we'll show a video illustrating the pilot drill, simply drilling to the stop that's created in the drill itself. We go to depth and stop. The difference of the crestal bone to the top or the occlusal part of the surgical guide has been predetermined. Here I'm using paralleling pins to determine our position, to make sure to double check that everything is going according to plan. This next video will illustrate the use of a 3.5 taper drill, again going to depth. And this is real time, and you can see how real simple this procedure is. We're simply going in and out of the osteotomy site, creating our implant site. This video illustrates we're using a key for the 4.3 millimeter central incisors. This key is 3.5 millimeters in diameter. So we use the 3.5 millimeter drill to drill to proper depth, again 13 millimeters. Here we're using paralleling pins, again, just to take a look and make sure that we're in the correct position, that we feel comfortable with everything we're doing at this time. A radiograph is taken. We're not coming too close to the natural teeth. The implants are spaced properly. You can see in this radiograph the dimension of the paralleling pin shows that we will have adequate spacing between the implants for ideal healing, integration of the implants. The next video is the next step. We're using a 4.3 taper drill to depth. And now we're going to use longer attachments into the implant so that we can actually place the implants through the keys, through the rings that are predetermined. Now you can see that these are a little bit longer than normal transferring copings with the replaced system. Again, everything is very precise in the system. It's very exact, and the length compensates for the thickness of the surgical guide, the rings, and the level of the crestal bone. Here we see a 3.5 replace select implant with the abutment attachment, which will allow us to place the implant in the correct position. And this next video shows we're hand placing the implant, threading it right through the preset ring. So we're placing this implant in the precise position that the dental laboratory envisioned us to place it. And we're going all the way to the hub. You can see the little markings, the little dots in the replace system. We want one of those dots to be towards the facial. That's where one of the lobes is facing towards the facial, which will allow us better final abutment creation and better aesthetics in the long run. So that little dot is facing towards the facial. And here's a close-up view of that. You can see we went all the way to the top. Very precise, very exact, very difficult to make an error in this situation. The next video will show we're removing those little abutments, seating surgical abutments, and you can see how we compensated for the length of the surgical guide. And what we're doing now is simply using pins that will lock the surgical guide in place precisely. So now this surgical guide can't move at all. We can adjust it either way to make sure that we have a complete seat prior to placement of our 4.3 millimeter diameter implants in the central incisor areas. So we have great stability of this surgical guide. It's not going to go anywhere.